Alright, so here is a slicing program, and I will show you guys how to use it. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get a file, which would be an STL file, and here I have a little boat, a very common 3D print. So you'd put the file on here, and it'll end up on this build plate. But the first thing you can do is you can select printers up here. This program, Ultimaker Cura, has different settings for different printers. I have a Creality Ender 3, so obviously I'll just click that and it'll add all these settings for my computer, or for my printer. The next thing you're going to do is when you're printing, you can print in different sizes. So right now on my printer I have a 0.4 millimeter, but it's also common to have a 0.2 millimeter nozzle. And that basically is the size of filament that's coming out of the extruder. So then when you print something, there's a lot of different settings depending on what you're printing. If there's a lot of overhangs, you might want to print uh, some supports. So right here I don't have it selected. So here is what it looks like without support. And there's also a thing called infill, which I have at 10%. So that means that inside of here, you'll see that 10% of it is filled up, and the other 90% is just air. So here's a really good example there. If I go over here and I change the infill, you've seen it, I can change the infill to, let's say, 50% and hit slice. There's also different patterns. I use grid, but there's all these different patterns here. If you're trying to make something strong, triangles and trihexagon are going to be your best option. Those are really powerful. So here we have another example just with a different infill. But you can see that the more infill, the more it will cost down here, and the longer it'll take. So right now it's 15 grams, but if I do 10%, which this is not a good example because it has very little infill, but you can see it cost me 8 cents less and 3 grams less of filament, and also about 20 minutes less. We also have, so if I go to support, I can click generate support, and you can see that right here I have a support overhang angle. So that means if anything is over 70 degrees, it'll print support. So here you can see is what it looks like with support. So you can see anywhere with that overhang. So here's the difference. This is what it looks like before and then after. So you can see that difference with supports. Now I don't have any supports because I don't normally print this with supports because it's a very common 3D print and you don't really need it. There's also something called build plate adhesion. And basically what that does is it's the way that before the printer actually starts printing what you have, it's going to print something on the outside. So you can see on the first layer, it has this little outside thing, and that is a skirt type. There's also a brim, which you would use the brim if you were printing something that's very tall and skinny, and you'd want it to be very stable. This would be a better option. There's also a raft option, and basically what this does is it will print below it. So it's actually not going to be printing straight on the bed. It's just going to be it's going to print a whole base for it and then start putting the model above that. So that is pretty much everything. That is pretty much the simplest things as far as slicing goes. There's a lot more that you can go in depth with this, but that's really all the basics you need to know for most of your models.